Brace yourself. It's Super Game Boy from Nintendo. Play your Game Boy games on the Super NES in living color. Even choose your own color combinations. Play all 350 Game Boy games. How does that strike you? Super Game Boy for the Super NES. Game Boy games in color, intense.
Man, I always loved those Nintendo retro ads. They're so good. That one there was a particular ad that was part of a VHS cassette that I had for Donkey Kong Country, I believe. And there was a lot of advertisements at the end of the VHS. Yeah, that always got me hyped. To the want to have a Super Nintendo and a Super Game Boy. Now, at the time, I had a Game Boy. That was the console I owned. And I used to play that Donkey Kong Country tape over and over and over, although I was probably just driving myself mental, and my parents too, I imagine. Yeah, so a little showcase of one of my games from my past. Blast from the past. This is kind of lightly inspired by Sega Block's series. I'm not getting into this as a series per se, but I did recently pick up the Super Game Boy, and I thought it'd be great to kind of revisit some of those titles I played when I was a kid. Bear in mind, I actually bought this a second time around. This was a game that I owned as a kid. Fortunately, I lost it. But anyway, I managed to pick it up again along with the Super Game Boy. So that's what I'm recording it on today. And yeah, I've been quite enjoying the replay of it. Again, bear in mind, I haven't really played this since a kid. I'm nostalgic to it to an extent. It's not going to go into anyone's top 10 list on Game Boy, that's for sure. But it is a decent platformer. Weirdly enough, it's not actually labelled as Duck Dodgers. It's just labelled as Daffy Duck, the Marvin missions. Now, there's actually the same game is also released on the SNES, but the 8-bit version is actually pretty different to that of the SNES version. This is one of these games that my parents brought me home from the Canary Islands. If we've any of our European and UK folks, when I was a kid, my parents used to go to the Canary Islands on their holidays and stuff like that, and they'd always bring me back a game. Now, there was always these dodgy shops in the Canary Islands, and they always had these multi-carts. But this was one of the first games that they brought home that wasn't a multi-cart. They actually brought me home a boxed game, complete. And unfortunately, as I was a kid, I never really thought keeping boxes and all that was important at the time, as I would know now. But anyway, Daffy Duck, it's a pretty decent platformer. I've always had respect for Sunsoft's work on some of the licensed products, especially in regards to Looney Tunes, because in fairness, for an 8-bit game, this really does look like Daffy Duck. There's some absolutely brilliant sprite work going on here. And remember, for an 8-bit title, even some of the backgrounds there, they're pretty much lifted straight from the cartoon, if you know the cartoon, in particular Duck Dodgers in the 24th and a half century, which is probably one of the most famous animated shorts Daffy Duck has ever been in.
Oh, indubitably, sir. Because there's no one knows his way around outer space like Duck Dodgers in the 24th and a half century.
But as the platformer itself, it's decent platformer. Daffy Duck has his signature pistol, and you shoot that with the A button, and then you use the B button to use his jetpack. Now, his jetpack can be used multiple times if you tap the B button in order to gain further height and distance in the jump itself. Because there is some tricky platforming segments here. Pistol is kind of annoying at times because it doesn't fire in a straight line. It pretty much fires down and it kind of takes a dip, but you get used to it after a while. And I gotta say, I do like the soundtrack, I do like the sound effects, structure of the level. Basically, it's platforming segments. It's filled in with a kind of a mid-tier boss in the middle, and then more platforming segment, and then that's followed by a boss at the end of each level. And you can see the boss here. I'm actually fighting Marvin the Martian here, but he pretty much shows up in most of the boss fights. They can be quite tricky, and there's a bit of strategy to these bosses. So every time you shoot a boss and you do some damage, there's actually a small window of invincibility. So when you hit them, they kind of start flashing for a moment. So it can't actually do any damage to Daffy. I think that's implemented purposely to give the player a chance, because if you were to do this particular boss fight by actually moving through the actual area rather than kind of cheesing it a little bit like I am here, I really think you'd struggle to get past this whole level. To note as well, you can do damage to enemies by jumping on them also, so some decent variety in the platforming itself. The game itself consists of only 5 levels, and they're on a password system. Yeah, it's quite frustrating towards the latter end of the game, but very, very short. Again, very, very short for someone that can actually beat the levels. I really, really want to try and visit some of these games on stream sometime soon and play some of these games that, you know, I've had particular history with. I did some of that with Wario Land already, but I'd love to do it with this game as well. Anyway, that's it for today's video. Just a little showcase of one of my games from my childhood. If I get some good feedback in this in the chat, let me know what you think, guys, and I might consider doing this in the future. Anyway, that's it for today. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.